night, a state of emergency declared on the Piikani Nation in Alberta.
It's important that we realize that if we're going to ensure that every community has access to reliable water.
Plus, the government announced more money towards water treatment plants in Nunavut.
It's so important that if we want to build a community where we are supportive of each other.
And the second annual National Ribbon Skirt Day is being celebrated across the country. Tanche and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Sav Jonesa. The Piikani Nation in southern Alberta has declared a state of emergency over an opioid crisis. The Blackfoot community near Lethbridge has been hit hard by 4 opioid-related deaths in the last week. In a statement on Tuesday, Chief Troy Knowlton says that the declaration of emergency will provide the Piikani with additional resources for emergencies and addiction treatment. He says the nation will be working with RCMP to find and deal with gang members and traffickers he believes are responsible for bringing drugs into the community. Chief Knowlton says grief and mental health counseling are available to those who need it. And he says the opioid crisis across Canada is possibly the biggest public policy challenge of the century. Ontario's police watchdog is investigating after a 21-year-old Thunder Bay woman was found dead, and officers allegedly did not respond to a 911 domestic disturbance call. The Special Investigations Unit says Thunder Bay Police received a call in the early morning hours on Saturday, but did not respond. They say a second 911 call was then made from the home to cancel the service. SIU says police eventually did respond after a third 911 call came through to report a woman had died. Manitoba RCMP say a 30-year-old man is in custody after a shooting that caused some northern communities to go into lockdown. The shooting happened Wednesday morning in St. Teresa Point, over 400 kilometers north of Winnipeg. RCMP say a 35-year-old male was shot and has non-life-threatening injuries. St. Teresa Point and 2 nearby communities went into lockdown, but that was lifted Wednesday evening. RCMP say investigation is ongoing and charges have not been laid as of yet. The Federal Housing and Infrastructure Minister made his first visit to Nunavut this week. As part of the visit, he announced that his government will be making some contributions to the water treatment plants in the territory. Trevor Wright has that story for us.
This week, the Nunavut and federal governments announced $194 million to go toward 8 infrastructure projects across 6 communities. The federal contribution is $129.9 million, while the territorial government is contributing $64.8 million. The bulk of the funding will be going toward water and wastewater treatment plants in Arctic Bay, Grise Fjord, Pond Inlet, Rankin Inlet, and Resolute Bay.
And it's essential that we recognize that every community in this country, regardless of which region, has safe and reliable drinking water. It's something that we too often take for granted in the South, and it's important that we realize that if we're going to ensure that every community has access to reliable water, that we make the investments to turn that into a reality.
While the funding was previously allocated in the federal budget, Fraser clarified these are new decisions on how to spend some of that funding. Nunavut MP Lori Idlaut said it's a move in the right direction for a territory facing significant infrastructure gaps.
As the MP for Nunavut, I'm always fighting for more resources to come to Nunavut so that we could make sure that there are better supports, better resources that Nunavut can use towards the improvement of well-being, health and well-being for Nunavut.
Additional investments include the purchasing of wheelchair-accessible vehicles in Pond Inlet and Resolute, as well as a $25 million contribution toward the Kivalak long-term care facility in Rankin Inlet, which is already under construction. Trevor Wright, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
It was a tough year for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals in Ottawa. The Liberals were forced to address the lack of affordable housing, deal with bail reform, and walk back its gun control legislation. The government also introduced its controversial Bill C-53, which recognizes Métis governments in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
What is shameful is that this Prime Minister is causing homelessness in this country.
Prime Minister.
The government continued to be on the hot seat throughout the year for a lack of affordable housing across Canada. This includes housing for Indigenous people living in urban centres, who make up an expanding number of homeless people living in major cities.
In the spring budget, the Liberals pledged $4 billion over 7 years to address the housing needs of Indigenous people living away from their home communities. But as Ottawa Indigenous housing advocate Mark Miracle told APTN's Nation, is nowhere near enough and spaced out over too long a period of time.
But I think it's safe to say that we won't see that money allocated to urban housing interests, certainly in the short term, and I wouldn't expect this government to survive long enough to realize their commitment of $4.1 billion, that even that is not a full commitment to the need that exists.
The government was also under pressure to tighten up its bail regulations after an OPP officer was allegedly shot and killed by First Nations man on bail in southern Ontario at the end of 2022. Justice advocates complained a new Bill C-48 will only further target Indigenous people who are already grossly overrepresented in the prison system. But at a press conference in May, then Justice Minister David Lametti said the legislation shouldn't affect the consideration of Gladue factors when granting bail.
It should not, in the sense that Gladue factors are applied at bail hearings, but it does not change the fundamental premise of bail, which is you have a right to bail unless you are a threat to flee, unless you're a threat to public safety, or if the administration if the confidence of the justice system will be brought into question.
Liberals were also forced to abandon amendments to their Bill C-21 gun control legislation after criticism of an attempt to ban all assault-style rifles unfairly targeted law-abiding gun owners, including Indigenous hunters.
The NDP was one of the parties against the amendments, and here's what Nunavut MP Laurie Idlot had to say after they were dropped.
We've helped to make sure that we're refocusing what the intent of C-21 was, which is to fight gang violence in urban centers, focusing on handguns and military-style weapons.
Another big point of contention was the introduction of Bill C-53. If passed, it will formally recognize Métis nations of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario as self-governing entities. A number of First Nations in Ontario do not see the MNO as a legitimate organization and fear Bill C-53 will be used to obtain land, hunting, and treaty rights in their traditional territories. At a rally against the bill on Parliament Hill in September, here's what Nipissing First Nation Chief Scott McLeod had to say.
It recognizes a Métis presence in our territories that historically have never been there, and really, when you dig deep, the due diligence for determining who is a Métis person has not been done.
Nevertheless, in a year-end interview with Nation to Nation, the Crown Indigenous Relations Minister insisted the legislation does not include land or harvesting rights.
But for the purpose of this legislation, it does not in any way extend the rights to land or harvesting rights. And I don't know how else I could be clear on this, because the legislation itself is very narrow in scope. So it talks about the governance of the Métis in these three jurisdictions.
The Assembly of First Nations also faced its fair share of challenges in 2023. After more than a year of infighting, National Chief Roseanne Archibald was formally ousted at the AFN Assembly in Halifax in July. This after an external report alleged Archibald harassed AFN staff. Cindy Woodhouse pushed for unity in the organization after being elected National Chief in December.
If we work on the issues together, we shouldn't have time to bicker. There's too many people suffering out there. There's people on the streets. There's people with First Nations that have many issues. And if we focus on our people.
Woodhouse, the former regional chief for Manitoba, is the second elected woman to lead the AFN. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
We have to step aside for a moment, but first, here's a look ahead to the East Coast, where National Ribbon Skirt Day was celebrated with Mi'kmaq culture. Angel Moore is working on this story.
I'm here at the school at the Sabaganagati First Nation, where students, teachers, and community leaders came together to have a round dance and to learn the history of Kojoa, a traditional Mi'kmaq dance. It was all to honor Isabella Kulak, who was shamed for wearing a ribbon skirt to school. I'll have more of the story to come on APTN National News.
Welcome back. As we continue our look at the big stories that happened around Turtle Island last year, we look to Alberta next. From forest fires to the opioid epidemic, it was a busy year. Here's our Chris Stewart with what happened.
On January 6, Anthony Bilodeau was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 13 years in the manslaughter and second-degree murder convictions of Jacob Sansom and Maurice Cardinal. He shot the two Métis hunters and left them for dead on a rural road. His father, Roger Bilodeau, had previously been sentenced to 10 years for 2 counts of manslaughter for his role in the two men's deaths.
They took away not only Maurice and Jacob, but they took away their families' joy. They took away more than just joy from us. They took away 2 people, that were loved. They were our life. They were our foundation. They were our everything.
In March, Imperial Oil met with residents of Fort Chipewyan in northern Alberta to talk about 2 leaks of the Curl Oil Sands Project tailing pond draining into Muskeg. The second leak was big enough to fill 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Residents were unimpressed with the oil company.
They never gave us answers besides, yes, it's in the water, yes, it's in the air, yes, it's in all your traditional foods. So if this keeps up, we're probably going to be the first oil sands environmental refugees.
The opioid epidemic in the province is not slowing down. In April, Dr. Esther Tailfeathers says that most of the deaths on the Kainai blood tribe in southern Alberta are due to overdoses.
I counted 68%. That was 42 out of 62 deaths were drug overdose related, drug related, or suicide since December 25th to March 25th.
Wildfire season began in late April, bringing smoke and air quality alerts for large parts of Alberta and beyond. The warnings would last all summer and well into the fall. Fort Chipewyan was once again in the news after a massive wildfire forced the evacuation of its residents at the end of May.
I think the members that evacuated are pretty just concerned about, whether, they're going to have a home to come back to. And with the efforts from Alberta Forestry, RM, the Three Nations, the Cooks, whoever it may be that has anything to do with it, they're fighting to make sure that everybody comes back to a home. The evacuation lasted 3 weeks before residents were allowed to return. No homes were lost, but some cabins were destroyed. In September, the Métis Nation of Alberta elected Andrea Sandmeyer as the new president, replacing Audrey Portra, who had been president since 1996.
The Otipemisiwak Métis government is eager to further strengthen our relationships with the governments of Alberta and Canada. We are collaborating on a nation-to-nation basis with Alberta and Canada to promote the interests and prosperity of our Métis communities.
In November, APTN spoke to environmentalists opposing Suncor's proposed expansion of one of their oil sands projects. They say the existing wetlands are vital to animals, First Nations, and providing a barrier against wildfires. They asked the Alberta Energy Regulator to reconsider its approval of the project.
So we already have over 30 projects that currently exist in the tar sands. And there's 19 toxic tailings ponds currently. So with this expansion, the Fort Hills mine expansion, there's going to be an increase in fresh water use and an increase in toxic tailings ponds.
The Alberta Energy Regulator has since ruled they will not rescind its approval for the project, giving a green light to its expansion. Those are some of the top stories in Alberta for 2023. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Anishinaabe musician Billy Joe Green lost his home to a fire before Christmas. Now his friends, fans, and family are rallying support. Fundraisers and festivals are planned to give the Winnipeg-based musician a leg up in his time of trouble. He joins us now by phone. Hi, Billy Joe. I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your home. What's it been like for you the past couple of weeks?
Well, it's been kind of a nightmare, and but lots of help came in. You know, the Canadian Red Cross showed up day of, you know, and they put us up in a hotel for 3 or 4 days. And then we got to stay also at the Wyndham on Medicine there for about a week, but it got pretty expensive, so finally we got to move into a relative's apartment. That's, you know, she let us have the apartment for until tomorrow. Tomorrow we're moving into a new place. Yeah, so things are nuts, crazy, but we're getting a lot of support from community all across our country, you know, from
That's fantastic.
Alberta to here.
What kind of supports exactly are you getting, and how is it helping you?
Well, the Red Cross, of course, they covered us for, you know, they gave us sustenance. They gave us a $1,000 credit card, so we bought groceries and had dinner, and then Show Lake 40, my home res. They paid for some of the Wyndham stay, and they also sent money to my GoFundMe page. And so the GoFundMe page is, you know, it loaded up pretty quick, but it's all in the bank now, so we're just waiting until tomorrow when we can move in to our new place, yes.
I'm happy to hear that you're not alone with this. I hear that there's also a music festival planned. Do you plan to be there as well?
Oh yeah, that's tomorrow night at the West End Cultural Center. We're going to be performing for an hour there, along with special guests. You know, we got Ernest Monia is going to show up. Errol Randall's going to do a couple songs, and a big star from Nashville plays for the guitar for the Bellamy Brothers. Randy Hebert is on holidays now, and he might stop in and do a couple of songs with Seaweed and us guys. So we'll just back them up, and also Ms. Dorian will be there, as well as Nee Joggin, and there's a young fiddle player out of Selkirk that's going to come. I think she's 16 years old. She's going to play some fiddle for the people, yes.
Well, it sounds like that will be a nice event to kind of take your mind off things, hey?
Well, yeah. Well, we're not in the clear yet. We still have to get some furniture and get some of my guitars restored to working condition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you have a lot going on there, hey?
Yes, and it's all for the positive now. You know, we got we did our little grieving time, you know, but we got the hell out of that grieving time and got on our feet and started, you know, punching through, you know, today and the future. And yeah, I'm not gonna let that get me down, because, you know, I've got a lot of things to do yet.
I'm really glad to hear that, Billy Joe. We're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for speaking with us today, and best of luck in your future.
Okay.
We need to take one last break. We'll see you when we return. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Shirley Parsons shared with all of us this colorful sunset from Manitou Beach, located just 2 hours north of Regina, Saskatchewan. Thanks so much for sending this in, Shirley. We want to see your pictures, so send them to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast.
It'll be -5 in St. John's, -10 in Charlottetown, -20 in Kuujjuaq, -11 in Cartwright. It'll be -10 in Quebec City and -4 in Montreal. It'll be 0 in Toronto and -2 in North Bay. -7 in Timmins, -23 in Big Trout Lake. Puckatawagan is a cold -23 and God's Lake is -18. -5 in Gimli, -12 in Barons River. -8 in Regina, -6 in North Battleford. -25 in Stony Rapids, -11 in Buffalo Narrows. -16 in Fort McMurray, -20 in High Level. -1 in Calgary, -3 in Edmonton. +7 in Vancouver, +4 in Bella Coola. -21 in Fort Nelson, and 0 in Prince George. -32 in Old Crow, -20 in Watson Lake. -27 in Yellowknife, and -27 in Norman Wells. -34 in Tuktoyaktuk, -25 in Saxe Harbor. -22 in Chesterfield, and -22 in Mill Cove. -24 in Resolute, and -22 in Arctic Bay.
Today, people across the country are celebrating the second annual National Ribbon Skirt Day. An event took place at a Winnipeg mall where Indigenous women, girls, and gender-diverse people wore their ribbon skirts with pride. Many people gathered to dance, sing, and watch while ribbon skirt wearers took over Winnipeg's largest shopping center. Ribbon skirts are an important piece of clothing for ceremonies and cultural events. A skirt's significance may be different for each person who wears one, but often symbolize identity, survival, and womanhood. The national holiday came to be after a 10-year-old Saskatchewan girl named Isabella Kulak was shamed for wearing her ribbon skirt to a formal dress day at her school in December 2020. She received international support for the incident after her story was shared online. The school later apologized, and a federal bill was passed to recognize the day.
Today we have a community here to support our Indigenous relations. It's so important that if we want to build a community where we are supportive of each other, that we are together and working together, listening to each other, and supporting each other. And it's so beautiful to see all of you beautiful human beings here today amongst each other to support our matriarchs in this community, our women that are life givers and birthers of our people.
That's all the time we have for your APTN National News this beautiful Thursday evening. For news anytime, please visit our website at aptnnews.ca. I'm Sav Jonesa, and from all of us here at APTN, thanks for joining us tonight. Take care.